It's Saturday and a beautiful day in Simpsonville, South Carolina. Looking forward to going to church tomorrow. Today I received an urgent email, a prayer request for a 3-year-old little girl who was found at the bottom of a swimming pool. They didn't know how long she'd been down there, but when they brought her up, they were able to resuscitate her and get her breathing again. Now she's in intensive care in a pediatric center. Unknown whether or not there was any brain damage done because of the lack of oxygen going to the brain. She's on a respirator to make sure that she breathes. And only God knows what the outcome of this situation will be. Her name is Kaylee. Her parents are obviously already grieving in the fact that she had this accident. At the same time, received an email from a person who's up against what seems to be an impossible situation, a relationship problem, and is just about given up on anything happening here in this time on earth. Both of these situations seem impossible, but nothing is impossible with God. Nothing is impossible without realizing the power of prayer. And so I want to talk to you today on the subject of prayer, and hope that you'll pray for both of these situations. What is prayer? Prayer is a conversation with God. Now remember, conversation is two-way. Conversation is not only talking to God, but then being still and listening to God as He speaks back. Conversation with God is very, very important. Prayer is a very important privilege that we have. We have man to God, we have praise, petition, confession, complaint, thanksgiving, trust, and intercession. Today we're calling you for intercession so that you pray for Kaylee and for this person that has a difficult relationship to resolve. And then there's God to man. His calling, He called me into the ministry. His correction, He's certainly done lots of that with me. His concern when we are going in the wrong direction. His condemnation when we've made a mistake, but also His comfort, His criticism, His congratulations, and His forgiveness. Now, there's a lot of controversy about time and position for prayer. Many theologians say early. I mean, they get up at 4, 3, 5 to pray with God. And I remember one pastor that I sat under that said, starting a day out without prayer is like starting out on a long trip in an automobile without first getting gasoline. I don't particularly become very effective at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Matter of fact, I'm not terribly effective at 5 o'clock, and marginal at 6. And then there's the positions of prayer. In the closet, kneeling, hands lifted, prostrate, head bowed, standing, where 2 or more are gathered. We could make a case for all of these positions. We could make a strong case for early morning prayer. But you know, the prayer instruction that I find the most helpful in the Bible is to pray without ceasing. That is, from the moment you wake up, whatever time it might be, till the time that you fall asleep. Sometimes going to sleep is difficult. I always tell everybody, well, pray. It's amazing how the devil wants you to go to sleep when you're praying. And instead of counting sheep, talk to the shepherd. Nevertheless, I'm convinced, thoroughly convicted in my heart, that God is infinitely more concerned with the position of your heart than He is with any part of your body. And as to 2 or more gathered together, I think it's a wonderful verse, but I believe that God hears me very, very well, even when I'm all by myself. So pray without ceasing. Don't worry about the position of your body, but worry about the position of your heart. Are you praying in sincerity, with an urgency? Are you praying with real compassion and concern? Are you praying knowing that he can do whatever he wants to do? The Lord's Prayer is a model prayer. You find it in Matthew 6 and other Gospels. It's not a route prayer. It's not a prayer to memorize. It's a prayer that tells us some of the ingredients that ought to be in our prayers. Sometimes John 17 is called the Lord's Prayer because he prayed for us. But one of the things that we're warned about is in Matthew 7:7 to not pray in vain repetition or with lengthy prayers, eloquent prayers with lofty words. God doesn't care what your vocabulary is. And God's certainly not interested in meaningless, vain repetition. And one of the lessons that I learned a long time ago is when you believe God has heard your prayer and has actually answered it, even though it may not have yet come to pass, it's time to stop praying and start believing. Start trusting that God has heard you. He has said he will take care of it, and to rest on that promise. Let me close with this. Matthew 21:22. In all things you ask in prayer, believing, and you shall receive. Now, I don't want to make that too simplistic. I mean, we're not talking about praying for Corvettes, BMWs, or a fancy house. We're talking about praying inside of God's will. If he wants you to have those things, he'll give you those things. But we are talking about praying things that we know are within his will. We know that he wants all relationships to be as good as they can possibly be. He says you'll know them by their love for one another. And so we can pray with a fervent prayer that this relationship situation will be resolved, pleasing to God and glorifying to his name. As to this little girl that fell in the pool, can God work all things together for good even though it wasn't good that she fell into the pool? Well, I can tell you from an experience that goes way back into the 1980s when a similar situation happened to a little boy. His brain function never came back completely. He didn't function at a high level at all, just a little above a vegetation state. And yet, the testimony of that young mother is that he worked all things together for good. Not only did she come to salvation, but she saw hundreds of other lives that helped her work with that little boy. Glorify God. Is it hard? Yes, it is. God never promised us it was going to be easy. He never promised us we'd be immune from trouble. Can we pray fervently that this little girl will have no brain damage and be restored 100% to her parents? Absolutely, we can pray that way. If that's not what happens, can we pray that all things will work together for good for that family? Absolutely, we can. Can we trust God to do what needs to be done in this situation? Yes, we can. So, regardless of the position of your body, regardless of the hour of the day, would you pray for these two situations? And remember the simple principles of prayer. That's your thought for the day. Don't forget to go to church tomorrow. God bless you and have a great day.